The proof of the pudding is in the eating. I'm sure you have heard this saying before. It means that to actually understand something, you must learn from practical experience rather than appearance or theory. This is in fact the whole purpose of this ICT guest lecture series. We want you to learn from practitioners from the ICT industry. I have met many people who remember that the best lectures they attended at the university were the guest lectures. Hello everyone, I am Ravi Fugwa, lecturer at the University of Technology Mauritius, and I am pleased to be your host for this online ICT guest lecture series. Some ground rules for this event. Please remain muted until the end, when you will have the opportunity to ask questions. Please be aware that this event is being recorded and the recording will be shared with you after the event. Today, we are kicking off this series with a lecture on data protection and security mechanisms. To talk about this topic, we have amongst us a UTM alumnus who works at Aerow ECM World. This company was founded in 2004 in France, where its head office is found, and it has different branches, namely in Switzerland, Belgium, and Mauritius. It is a digital services company that offers 360 degrees expertise focused on information processing. It has consultants and experts to help its clients meet their digital transformation and document management challenges with leading market solutions for data and content production, management, distribution, security, compliance, automation, and archiving needs. As for our dear alumnus, after completing his BSc honors in software engineering in 2012, he started at Aerow as a software engineer developer, evolving to various roles like senior ECM consultant, expert ECM consultant, architect, open text solutions trainer, up to management roles with international work experience. He's currently manager for the Open Text Enterprise Content Management Division at Aerow, managing projects and support activities for the division. Please join me with a large round of applause in welcoming Saad Mohammed. Dear Saad, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this lecture. So, like Mr. Fugwa already presented, a brief introduction on me. I will be switching to the lecture directly, and I'll be sharing my screen with you right away. All right, so today our lecture will be on data protection and the security mechanism, how we protect data and what are the security mechanisms that we apply in the enterprises, industries, or any organization with IT means. Our aim and agenda for today would be an introduction to data protection and the security mechanism for sure. We'll see the three pillars of information security, and we'll also see some laws and regulations that are applied when it concerns data protection and the security mechanism that are being applied. So we have local laws like the DPA, you might heard of it before, which is a Data Protection Act. And we see one example of an international law, let's say a foreign law, which is a GDPR, many used in Europe. And eventually we see the different security mechanisms, the techniques being used in IT industries to protect and secure data. Along the lecture, we'll be also seeing some short videos of ECM solution with the security mechanism being applied. So ECM or enterprise content management solution, it could be the application being used in enterprise, etc. So we'll see like some small demo on that. And eventually at the end, we'll have a question and answers session. What is data protection? So strategies and processes that are used to ensure that data are secured in a private way. they are available when we need them, and the correctness, so the integrity of your data, um, it's called data protection. So data protection also called data security, which is another term for data protection. So you might be um, come across the word of data security. You can know that it is in fact data protection. And why we need data protection? Um, we need data protection, like we said, to have secure information or data, but it is also very important to adopt a strategy for any organization that will record or collect data, that will manage the data or store the data, because as we can imagine, data could be also sensitive. And with successful strategy of data protection, we can ensure that data loss or prevented, data theft, and also corruption. Let's say that an intruder and an attacker were able to come into a system and access data, but along with the data protection strategy, even after that, we can, with good knowledge, minimize the impact, the damage that can cause in the event of a breach of a disaster. All right, so another term that come along with data protection is a data privacy. And what is data privacy? Data privacy actually is the guideline of the laws that we enforce to how we should protect data, how we should collect data or manage the data based on the sensitivity and the importance of the data. Um, let's take a few examples. There are two type of information that we normally collect and we keep them as private. So the first one is the personal health information. So personal health information could be your medical records, etc. And the personally identified information, which is also known as a PII. It could be any information that we are able to identify a person. So below, as you could see, ID numbers, they are PII information, medical records, they are PHI information. So we can recognize someone by the names, the birth date, along with the names for sure. To if we need to have like exact information, let's say the names are common between different person, but the date of birth could be different. Okay. Um, and the contact information for sure. With the contact information, you are able to identify who was this person. But we also have different type of information which could be sensitive and private. At some point, someone might not want to share their medical records publicly, and the privacy that applies to that matters. And we'll see along the lecture how we protect those information. Um, and why we need data privacy in enterprises, in organization, etc. We must ensure that the data being shared or exposed, they are accessed only by approved parties. So you have the right to decide who can access your information. And obviously, if you have sensitive information, um, you can have attackers, or you can also call them criminals, IT criminals, that can access your data and perform malicious use of your data. Um, you can have a common example. Today, it's being done less, but a common example could be your Facebook account. If it is not secured correctly, someone can access your account and perform bad intention usage of it. Okay. Similarly, in enterprises, information are very confidential. We can have a banking system, and they need to be secured, and the data being used within the banking system should be private and should be used only by the bank and the customer. And before we also talk that data privacy, there are guidelines how to protect data. So when we talk about guidelines, laws come along it, and also the regulatory requirements. So when we have a data privacy rules, we ensure that the organization are using those information, they follow the right requirement and the right guideline. Okay, so when we talk about securing information or data, there are three characteristics, main, or we can say the three pillars of information security, which are known as confidentiality, integrity, and availability. What is confidentiality? Confidentiality is to ensure that your sensitive data or your data, um, they reach the right person, and they are not exposed to unwanted person or subject. And integrity is the correctness of the information being shared along the way. So in a system, let's imagine that we have a document. Your document could be in a different state. Let's take a banking example. We have a loan application. So we can imagine three roles in the banking loan application. So initially, there will be the loan requester, okay? And the loan requester will fill all the forms, attach all the documents, etc. And you will share your required information to the bank, okay? At the second step, you can imagine a flow. Your document will be sent to the a reviewer at the bank. Okay, it could be an assistant for the manager, etc. So the reviewer will review your document. So when your document is being shared from your entry point, it could be via email, etc. And while it goes to the person at the bank, in between. Your data can be tampered, and we need to ensure that the data they are correct, we maintain integrity, so that when the data reach the reviewer at the bank, they receive the right information and the right content. And after that, for sure, if everything is okay, they will send it to the manager, maybe to approve your loan, etc. So it's just an example in a scenario where we need to send exact information. And you can imagine in a various scenarios in enterprises, you can have nuclear based enterprises, you can have chemical enterprises, cosmetic, insurance, etc. A lot of communication information are being transferred to different parties. So the correctness and the integrity of those information or the content should be maintained. So integrity is very important in information security, and availability. So we must ensure that whenever we need information or any information that were agreed to be shared, as it should be available when it is needed. All right. So what is the difference between data protection and data privacy? So data protection and data privacy, they use interchangingly. So you can imagine that they are used along each other. Okay. So at the end, data privacy defines who has access to the data. So it's the rules, the business requirement, or it could be the law requirement, how and who are accessing the data and in which context. And data protection, there are just the tools and the policies that we consider to restrict the access to the data to required parties. Okay, so we'll see together some laws and regulation for data protection. First of all, we see a local law, so the law that or the act that is in place in Mauritius today. So you have the DPA Act 2017, which is a Data Protection Act, which the main aim for data protection is to ensure the person sharing the information, um, they need to know how these information are being used about them and for what is the purpose or the minimums that they should know according to the law, or how others will use those information. So again, taking another scenario, maybe you have insurance, health insurance, etc. So you will share at some point your information, like your identity card number, could be your passport number, your address, at some point your banking account, if you need to claim, etc. So we must ensure that when we are sharing this information, the insurance companies are maintaining your information in a correct way, in a secure way, so that your information are not shared externally. And how they will be using those information also is very important. So if you read the Data Protection Act, which I will provide the link after, there are two main roles that concern this act. The first one is the data controllers, and the second one is a data subject. So whenever you see data controllers, know that data controllers or is a person, organization holding information about someone. And data controllers, when they control information or when they manage information, they must comply with the DPA Act. So, sorry, the DPA 2017 Act. And for that, they need to follow the principle and they need to handle the information according to that. As a data subject, those are individual actually, the individuals that have the corresponding right. So we take a scenario again. Let's take the insurance company again. So the data controller, they are the insurance company or the people working with your data or information as an insurance company. And if you are applying the for a membership at the insurance company, so you are the data subject. Okay. And continuing on the DPA Act, what concerns mostly is the technique we use to capture data. It could be OCR, it could be data entry, etc. So how we are capturing this information and the rules we're applying when we're capturing this information, we should consider the DPA 2017 and how we're transmitting the information. So let's say on a banking system, you have your information and it need to be transferred to the main government bank in Mauritius. But for sure, we have agreement and law according to that. And we need to respect those laws, okay? And how we transmit information, the technique, and how we maintain the privacy while transmitting information is very important. How we manage the information or the data of someone or in an individual should be aligned with the DPA Act 2017. And along the way, where we are storing the information or the data and how we are recording or saving information is very important. How we are also securing it using various security mechanism techniques. And for information, even if the law is or the act is mentioning 2017, it has been in force only since 15 of January 2018. And this link below, later I will share it with you, so you can have as reference and you can read the act for more details. Okay, so in this slide, it's an example of a foreign law. So it is a GDPR. The GDPR is a short form for General Data Protection Regulation. It is used in Europe or any European Union countries, but not only. It protects data and the privacy of data, also in European economic areas. So whenever or wherever we are using data linked to European people or, or subjects, the GDPR laws come into place. So we need to consider the GDPR aspect. And among all the laws between different countries, the GDPR is also considered as the toughest law for privacy and security in the world. Why? Because the punishment they are very high. The fines sometimes could be in millions of euros, and it's just a matter to enforce security if those laws are not respected. And considering GDPR, why we are also talking about GDPR? Because in Mauritius we have many companies, sometime in offshore mode, etc. So they are working with European data or people information. So the GDPR oblige organization to respect the GDPR rules. Um, it can come in different forms. So it can be trainings on compliance, security, etc., to create awareness to people so that when they manage people in Europe data, or when they collect or they will send data, they respect those rules. So just like in Mauritius, we have the DPA which were acted in 2018. Similarly, the GDPR latest date is 25th of May 2018. And we have some principle of GDPR. So we have 7 main principles. So the first one is to ensure that data are being used and secured according to the law. We should have fairness. So data should be fair, should be non-penalizing for people and according to the law. It should be transparent between parties. Similarly, where we have the data controllers and the data subject in the DPA law. So information between the two parties should be transparent. Similarly, the GDPR, we have the transparency that should be maintained. And the second principle is the purpose should be defined. Why we are capturing, transmitting, or managing data for a certain person or organization. So the purpose should be defined clearly and should be according to the law. And data minimization is to collect only information that are required. And non-required information should be avoided unless if the aim or the purpose is defined. And data accuracy is like we know in every information or data that we share, it should be accurate. And where we are storing the information, which is a storage limitation, should also be considered. So we should know where our data are being stored. In the GDPR rules in Europe, they have the right to ask, okay, where are you storing my data? Is it on the cloud? Is it on premises? What is the location, even if it is on the cloud? And the integrity and the confidentiality should be maintained. So two of the pillars of the information security. And eventually, who is accountable on which part in the security rules is very important. So mainly if you're sharing your information to an organization or the enterprise, so they are accountable on how they are managing your data. And locally, will say that they are the data controllers. Okay, so these were two examples of laws, one locally and one in Europe. Okay, so our next chapter of this lecture will be on the different security mechanisms that we apply today in enterprises, organization. And it's a way how we protect data according to the laws internationally or locally. So the first one, which is very common. It's to authenticate. So authentication is a way or a type of security mechanism. So today we don't only have the classic ID password challenge to authenticate. We also have advanced authentication. As you might know already, we have biometrics. So biometrics, they could be a retina scan recognition. It could be a fingerprint. It could be a face recognition, etc. Um, we have tokens. They're used for virtual private network access. They can be used for banking transaction, etc. So token could be a physical device, or it can be a virtual device also. So we call it soft token. And hot token, they are the it could be like a small calculators where you put your challenge code and then you generate the token, and then you can have access to a specific system. Or we have certificates. So X Pfizer is a type of a compliance for certificates, but we can have different type of certificate between servers, etc., which we'll see after in upcoming slides. And authentication is very important because when we perform certain action on a system within an enterprise organization or an application, we need to know who is doing this action. So the way to do that is to get authenticated by various security mechanisms. So ID and password, they are the classic one, but if we need to enforce, we can use more advanced technologies like biometrics, tokens, and certificates. All right, so once you're authenticated in a system or in your enterprise application, etc., um, what you can do within that system is also important. So we need to maintain the confidentiality at this level as well, because a system admin can do a different type of action. Writers in an application can do a different type of action. Readers have restricted action, etc. So authorization, it is a concept to control the object, or it could be documents, content, files, records, with a range of access level. So with authorization, we define based on your roles and access what you can do. So with authorization, we allow access to authorized content only based on your roles. So my next slide will be a small video with an authorization example in an enterprise content management solution. So it's a demo application. The product is OpenText. The client interface is D2. So it's a small application where we are managing documents. So the first part will be to see within the project for a specific document, for a draft document, what are the access right? What are the different authorization based on the role? So in this part, we'll go on the content menu and we'll navigate to the permissions menu. And on this pop-up, you will see okay, the template of the security being applied, so the authorization being applied. So anyone connecting the application, they will have non-permissions. They will not even be able to see the document, but the owner has the delete right. The engineering team, the controller has a delete right. The OTT users, which is a group of users, they can only relate to the document. So they can create some relation to the document. Relation is a concept to link different documents. And the admin and the doc controllers, they have the direct right. So it's an example of authorization in a granular way. Okay, so another concept of security mechanism, or another type of security mechanism, it is an audit. You might have heard of audit operation in companies where they are doing an audit to see what occurred within application, who did which action, etc., and why there are performance issues, why there are some flaws. So audit is a security mechanism. So we have in different products, it could be editor's product or custom-made product, the audit mechanism to capture every possible event and expose it for later review, security review or trace purposes. Like we just said earlier, it could be for audit operation. So the audit is like a log, and for sure we trace only what would be the business or the customer requirement to trace. And whenever there are audit operation, we can define the action or the operation that occurred for a certain cause, seen in the audit trail. And audit they also use alternatively to see the trend or to evaluate trainings. So normally we have our application that will be deployed in the production environment. So we'll have all the users using the application. But before going to production, we have different environment. We have the user acceptance test environment. So the customers, they will test on those environment and we'll train them also on that environment. And after that, when it goes in production, so we can activate the audit and we can be sure that if they were trained correctly or if they are able to work in a secured way on the application. And it's also used for monitoring. So if you want to monitor someone action or on a system for specific reasons, the audit trail could be used also. So I'll show you one example in a small video how audit are being captured for a document, the same application I showed earlier. So as you could see on my screen, so there is this document that has been selected. So below you could see there is a small widget named audit. So in the audit widget, I can see all the trace, who created the document, who saved the document, at what time they created the document, the version of the document, etc. And I could also see that changes that were performed. So a status is a metadata of the document. So initially it was in draft, not now it has changed the status to in review. So with the audit trail concept or security mechanism, we can trace what was the action being done on a system. All right, so another type of security mechanisms that are used in various enterprises today, especially where we have cloud implementation, we have centralized Active Directories, etc. It is a single sign-on. So single sign-on is a concept to use a single login and password. Or you can authenticate by different security authentication mechanism. So the one time you connect, you will be able to access all the application with the same session or token of the organization. So as you could see on the left, it's a non single sign-on connection. So you have four applications. So the web application 1, the web application 2, web application 3, etc. So let's say the first one is Microsoft Office, the second one is an internal application, etc. So if it is not using the single sign-on, so you need to have different username and password to connect to the application. So you need to manage them independently. So let's imagine your organization have like 10 applications that you need to work with on a monthly basis. So even to remember, and sometimes you need to save it. So sometimes it could be secured, sometimes not secured, and you are not using the credentials that are known or is stored securely by your organization. Contrary to the single sign-on concept, you can use your Office 365 account and you have an Active Directory where you have your accounts. So you are declared as the member of your organization and you will connect to the different application the one time you connect. So let's imagine a scenario, you go to your browser you want to access your document management system of your organization. So you sign in the first time. So you sign in with your Microsoft account. So next time you go on your Office Outlook, you go on your Outlook online. So you don't need to sign in again. So it's a way to ensure that we are connecting with security credential that is stored in your Active Directory of the organization. Okay, so we have various solutions in the market. So one I told you, it is Office 365. It can be plugged with an Active Directory. You have the Azure as well, Microsoft Azure, where you can manage this type of operation. And we have different type of product like the RSA sign-on manager. You can have it as a reference to check after. Um, okay, when we communicate within different application, or we can communicate from a sender to a receiver, we need to ensure that the information they are encrypted. Okay, I mentioned a documentum platform, which is a product. So this product will communicate or transmit content securely between servers and the client. So servers is the where you are storing your data or your file. Clients could be the application, the front end you're using. And it is very important because when sending information from the client to the servers, let's imagine we have SQL interaction. So we need to select information from the system or from the server. Um, if the data is not secured, an intruders or an attackers or eavesdroppers can access the communication in between, and they can change the query, the SQL query. So they can we can also call it SQL injection. So they can inject different SQL queries, and it will impact the server. It can create malicious action like deleting some records, or they can also retrieve some records that should have been secured on the database. So a protocol that we use today is the SSL. The SSL protocol, which is a security layer, so for the security service layer, when they are employed to your or applied to your communication, whenever there are someone eavesdropping the communication, they will get the data in an encrypted way. So also, when you have your data encrypted, it gives the system architect to have more flexibility, how they want to design the communication coming from outside by applying firewalls uh, configuration, and also they can define when content or communication being shared outside the organization, so they are secured. So one example is the SSL protocol, and it's a way to secure and encrypt communication. All right, we have another concept known as the digital rights management. So before we spoke about how information could be sent to organization, we can have firewall in between, we can apply the protocol, but the content itself, how they are being used, and what action can the receiver do on that content or the information can be controlled also. And we have different DRM solution, so digital right management solution on the market to control the access to the information outside the organization. Maybe you came across a document or a PDF, a document. You could see the security configuration applied to that PDF document. If you can print, if you can edit the PDF, or you can only view. So it's a read-only mode. So even if you use any pro tools, if there are security applied to that, um, the right is maintained. So the digital right management is a concept to ensure that data being accessed outside the organization, they are accessed in the way that you want it to be. So this example below, it's a smart diagram to where you can see there is a user sending information to user C. So the user with a digital right management solution, he define if the user can print, view or edit. So in his case, he don't want the user to print the document. They can only edit or view the document. So in the tools accessing the content, the print option will be disabled or hidden. Okay. And also interesting security mechanism. Um, it is a MAC, which is a mandatory access control. So it's a way to identify if you're accessing from a device or from a component with a unique um, credential or unique identification. So the example below, you can imagine that we have interagencies. So we have different companies. So let's imagine a nuclear company and a transport company. Okay, so both need energy. So the nuclear companies, they will produce energy. Okay, and the transport could be trains. So trains will need electricity sometime to be able to operate the trains. So let's say the engineer from a different company, they need to have access to document. But the director of the transport company, they might have access to information that only they should be able to know, but the engineers will not be able to know. So we call them clearance. So based on your clearance or your authorization, you will have access to these documents. So the MAC control or the mandatory access control will come into play. So the device the director is using or the entity or the domain the director is using to access the information from the nuclear company should be controlled in a way that his device or his domain is known already by the nuclear company, and his role also is known by the nuclear company. So on this system, they will connect. So the director will connect with his account, but using authorized device or domain to connect. And on the contrary, if the engineer will connect, so he'll not have access to top secret document, like you could see below. On the contrary, for unclassified documents, so they can have read and write access because they are non-classified. They are not a secret document. Um, okay, we have another concept when we work with database and file system, which is called a repository encryption. So I'll go on my next slide to show what is a repository. So repository is a concept where you can separate your database and your file system, your content storage. And for your client application, it could be your web application or your desktop application. So they will connect to an intermediate server. So we can also call it a content server, the server that will serve the content. So the client application never have access directly to the server that stores a file or the server that has the database. So if ever someone is able to get into the system, so they will need to pass through the content server. And within the content server, they all need connection to connect to the um, repository. It could be either the database or the file system in a secured way. So even if they access the first layer, they will not be able to retrieve information because the information for the database is on different server and can be accessed only locally between the machine and the file system. It is on different server. It could be on the cloud or it can be on premises storage. So it's a way to prevent intruders from reading content, even if they obtain access to the file or the repository level. because it is split in two parts. So the database is independent, the file system independent. So even if you have access to the metadata of content, so you are not getting the content because it is stored on different server. On the contrary, if you access the let's say the content, but you don't have the metadata for this content. So it's also help at operating system level to apply the security rules and to avoid some from breach. And similarly, as the data they are stored on this server, and database server and the file system they are storing only the file. So the administrators, they can do backups of the files independently, and they can do the backups of the database independently. So even if someone have access to the backup, it's not complete. So it's a way to encrypt your storage to split in two parts. So the database part and the file system part, and the connection should be done with the intermediate server. All right. Today we have signatures that we perform for various reasons. Could be application, gym membership, or various purpose. Um, Signatures can be forged, can be tampered also if you do it manually. There are people that are good at performing this illegal action, and they can impersonate someone else's signature. And the use of using electronic signature is very interesting because you will associate your signature electronically with any piece of content. It could be within a workflow, task. So you have a task that you need to do on your system, or while your content they are being changed, like we discussed earlier, the banking system, it could be in different state at the senders and the receiver, etc. Um, this help actually. So the signature itself could be stored as an audit object in an audit table, and they can contain justifications that provide to an auditors who did this action and at what point. And also with digital signature or electronic signature, you need to authenticate as well. You just don't sign directly, but you authenticate. So my next video is an example. So here is a document that someone need to sign. And while signing the document, his signature is already stored in the system. He just need to authenticate with his account. Okay, and at the end, he will define his intention, why he signs the document. So this document is going in a review, so it's okay to review the document. So we can have diverse reason depending on the enterprise. All right, we have lots of security mechanisms. So as we go on the last one for today, we saw the security mechanism being applied while the information or the content are being used in organization or enterprise. But what happens when we don't need those data information? Um, we have a concept known as shredding. So your or our information could be stored on some disk. And the shredding operation is to damage or to shred the disk so that the data are not usable. But using forensic method, since those disks they are shredded with physical means, we have magnetism component or magnet component that can be reconstructed, and the information within those magnet could be retrieved by forensic method. And the way to avoid that is to use digital shredding. So digital shredding is the concept to ensure that information cannot be retrieved by employing any forensic method. So if you're using, even if you're using on-premises hard disk, um, you can shred the document digitally. So with some programs, it will intercept your hard disk and it will shred it virtually. And the hard disk will not be able to be used anymore in terms of retrieving that data. And it could be on the cloud also, because today we have the cloud concept. So we have um, data centers with big storage. And with the GDPR rules or the Data Protection Act, at some point, if you're not hosting your information on a data center on the cloud, we have the right to ask this organization to, in fact, shred or clean our information. So they will do it with a digital means, so a digital shredding. And what is interesting is that you don't have any information of your company on this drive on the cloud, and the drive can be reused after. Contrary to the physical disk shredding, so that this is damage itself. So it is physical. So it's a way to save time. It's a way to save money, because if you do a physical shredding of your disk, so you need to order, so it takes time. You need to reinstall on your disk, re-put data on your disk, and save money, because we need to in this scenario, physical shredding, we all need to buy new disk. So with digital shredding, we are reusing the same drive. And of course, our one of our main aim is to go green. So we need to save any operations that can create pollution around the world, in our island, etc. So when we destroy those disks, sometimes we have components that are bad for the environment. So if we use a digital shredding, it's full benefits in many aspects. All right, so thank you very much for attending this lecture. And after that, I would be glad to answer to any question that you have on this topic.
Thank you, Ali Saad, for this very interesting lecture. I'm sure everyone has learned a lot and will be having lots of questions for you.
All right.
I will now stop the recording.